Heavy Russian missiles and drones attacks struck deep inside Ukraine for the third consecutive day, causing significant civilian casualties and widespread damage to critical energy infrastructure. Ukrainian officials reported strikes across multiple regions, including the capital Kyiv, the western city of Lviv, and the industrial hub of Dnipro. Air raid sirens wailed nationwide throughout the morning as Ukrainian air defenses, bolstered by recent Western deliveries, scrambled to intercept incoming threats. The Ukrainian Air Force Command stated that air defense systems successfully shot down a majority of the attacking missiles and drones, including numerous Shahed-type loitering munitions and several hypersonic Kinzhal missiles. However, many powerful strikes inevitably penetrated the defenses. In Kyiv, residential buildings in the Slomyansky district suffered direct hits, killing at least 7 people, including 2 children, and injuring over 20, according to emergency service. Rescue workers were still digging through rubble late into the afternoon. Mayor Vitaly Klitschko confirmed significant damage to apartment blocks and local power lines. Simultaneously, a major thermal power plant near the northeastern city of Kharkiv was severely damaged, plunging large parts of the region into darkness. Workers raced to make emergency repairs as fears grew over the stability of the national power grid heading into winter. Alexei Kuleba, head of the Kyiv Regional Military Administration, described the assault as massive and relentless, targeting civilians and essential services deliberately. President Volodymyr Zelenskyy, in a brief video address from an undisclosed location, condemned the attacks as terror from the skies and reiterated his calls for faster delivery of advanced air defense systems, specifically mentioning the urgent need for more Patriot batteries. He stated that Russia was attempting to break the spirit of Ukrainians before winter sets in. Ukrainian military intelligence suggested the strike were likely launched from Tu-95MS strategic bombers operating over the Caspian Sea and from positions within occupied Crimea and Russia itself. The intensity of the bombardment forced the temporary closure of Ukrainian airspace to civilian traffic. U.S. Secretary of Defense Peter Hegseth, speaking from Washington, confirmed the United States is expediting a planned shipment of air defense interceptors and is actively consulting with European partners on further immediate support. Secretary of State Marco Rubio stated he was in constant contact with Ukrainian Foreign Minister Dmitry Kuleba and key NATO allies, coordinating the diplomatic response and stressing the need for continued unity against Russian aggression. The attacks came despite ongoing, albeit dulled, diplomatic efforts and heightened global tensions. Damage assessment continued throughout the day, revealing the sheer scale of the assault on Ukraine's already battered cities and towns. The Kremlin issued a stark condition for any potential ceasefire or peace negotiations with Ukraine, declaring that the immediate and complete lifting of all Western sanctions against Russia is an absolute prerequisite. Kremlin spokesperson Dmitry Peskov, addressing reporters in Moscow, stated unequivocally that Russia cannot and will not engage in substantive discussions about ending hostilities while the economic war waged by the United States and its allies continue to inflict severe damage on the Russian people and our economy. Peskov framed the sanction imposed since the February 2022 invasion and significantly expanded over subsequent years as illegal acts of collective punishment that must be reversed before any diplomatic process can begin. He specifically cited the blocking of Russian central bank assets held abroad, the near total exclusion of major Russian banks from the SWIFT international payment system, and the extensive personal sanctions targeting President Vladimir Putin, key officials, and oligarchs as core obstacle to peace. These demands directly counter the long-standing position of Ukraine and its Western supporter, who insist that any settlement must include full Russian withdrawal from all internationally recognized Ukrainian territory, including Crimea and the Donbas regions annexed in 2022, as well as accountability mechanism. The statement appeared timed to follow the intense barrage of missile and drone strikes across Ukraine earlier in the day, reinforcing Moscow's position from a stance of perceived military pressure. U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio swiftly rejected the Kremlin's demand during a press briefing at the State Department. This is not a serious proposal for peace. It is an attempt at blackmail, Rubio asserted. The sanctions were imposed because of Russia's illegal invasion and ongoing war crimes. They will remain in full force until Russia ends its aggression, withdraws its force from Ukraine's sovereign territory, and adhere to the principle of international law it has so blatantly violated. Rubio emphasized that the United States, under President Trump, stands firmly with Ukraine and its right to self-defense and territorial integrity. European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen, speaking from Brussels, echoed Rubio's rejection, stating that the EU sanctions regime is directly linked to Russia's actions on the ground and would only be reviewed when Russia sees its assault and meaningful steps toward a just peace based on Ukraine's sovereignty are undertaken. President Volodymyr Zelensky's office reiterated Ukraine's refusal to negotiate under duress or to cede territory, calling Moscow's sanction-focused demand a delaying tactic and a sign of Russia's unwillingness to engage in genuine peace efforts. The Kremlin's hardline position, coupled with the day's devastating attacks, underscored the profound chasm between the warring parties and their international backers, casting a deep shadow over any for diplomacy and signaling a continuity and potentially an escalation of the brutal conflict. The United States and key European allies formally initiated the process of utilizing frozen Russian sovereign assets to fund substantial new military and humanitarian aid package for Ukraine. This unprecedented move, long debated in Western capitals, was announced simultaneously by U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent and European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen. Secretary Bessent, speaking from the Treasury Department in Washington, confirmed that approximately $300 billion in Russian central bank assets immobilized in Western financial institutions since the 2022 invasion would begin to be leveraged. After extensive legal review and in close coordinations with our international partners, we are taking concrete steps to redirect these funds to support Ukraine's defense and recovery. Bessent stated. He detailed that the initial tranche would involve the transfer of accrued interest on these assets, amounting to roughly $5 billion, with mechanisms being put in place to access the principal in the coming month. The funds are earmarked for urgent military purchases, including air defense system, artillery, ammunition, and combat medical supplies, as well as critical infrastructure repair following the latest wave of Russian strikes. European Commission President von der Leyen in Brussels emphasized that the EU parallel actions were legally grounded and targeted solely at state assets, not private individuals. This is not confiscation. It is the responsible use of windfall profits generated by immobilized assets to provide Ukraine with a means to defend itself and rebuild. She explained, the Kremlin reacted with fury, with Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov denouncing the move as theft and vowing severe and asymmetric consequences for any nations involved. President Vladimir Putin had previously warned that such action would be considered an escalation tantamount to direct participation in the conflict. U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio defended the decision as a necessary and lawful response to Russian aggression. Russia caused this destruction. It is only right that Russian resources pay for Ukraine's survival and recovery, not the American or European taxpayer, Rubio declared during a joint press conference with visiting German Foreign Minister Annalena Baerbock. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy immediately welcomed the announcement, calling it a historic step toward justice in a video message. This decision provides real, tangible support at a critical moment, he said, noting the funds would help address the immediate damage from the recent missile attacks and bolster Ukraine's air defense. Legal experts caution that the move could set a complex precedent in international law, while financial analysts warn of potential market turbulence and retaliatory measures from Moscow targeting Western assets still within Russia's jurisdiction. The action represents the most significant financial escalation by the West against Russia since the invasion began, directly linking frozen assets to Ukraine's battlefield needs and long-term reconstruction. President Donald Trump delivered a stark warning to the BRICS alliance: Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa. During an impromptu press conference at the White House, flanked by Secretary of State Marco Rubio and U.S. Trade Representative Jamieson Greer, Trump condemned the bloc's rapid de-dollarization effort and military coordination as a direct assault on American prosperity and global security. He announced Executive Order 14175 authorizing immediate secondary sanctions against foreign banks facilitating BRICS transaction in alternative currencies, and threatened 45% tariffs on all imports from member nations if hostile financial maneuvers persist. The order specifically targeted China's digital yuan expansion and India's rupees-based oil trade with Russia. Chinese Premier Li Qiang denounced the move as economic terrorism, while Russian President Vladimir Putin warned of asymmetric consequences. During an emergency BRICS virtual summit, India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi struck a conciliatory tone, urging dialogue over ultimatums, but affirmed India's commitment to sovereign financial policy. South African President Cyril Ramaphosa labeled the sanctions neo-colonial bullying. U.S. stock market reacted violently. The Dow Jones plunged 800 points, and energy stock cratered amid fears of disrupted oil flows from BRICS producers. Secretary Rubio later clarified that allies adopting non-hostile policies could apply for sanctions waivers, signaling a divide-and-conquer strategy. The BRICS bloc's emergency summit concluded with a declaration branding U.S. policies an existential threat to global stability, escalating tensions into uncharted territory. Chinese Premier Li Qiang revealed the alliance Shanghai Accord, a sweeping plan to replace the IMF and World Bank with a BRICS-run financial architecture under the accord. A joint currency reserve pool, $1.2 trillion in gold yuan, will bail out sanctioned members. Oil-gas transactions will bypass dollars via blockchain settlements. Defense tech sharing, hypersonic missiles, AI surveillance will counter NATO. Russian President Vladimir Putin announced immediate energy shipments to China priced solely in yuan, while India's Modi confirmed Diamond's gold reserve would back the rupee's new reserve role. South Africa mobilized rare earth exports for BRICS partner, crippling Western tech supply chains. U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio warned the Senate Intelligence Committee that BRICS now poses a systematic threat exceeding Cold War-era Soviet capabilities, citing intercepted data showing BRICS cyber units targeting Wall Street's trading algorithm. Director of National Intelligence Tulsi Gabbard confirmed China's deployment of quantum satellite capable of disrupting U.S. nuclear command system. Financial market imploded post-summit. Brent crude surged 18% as BRICS halted oil auctions in dollars. Gold hit $3,500 per ounce amid panic buying. The S&P 500 halted trading after a 12% freefall. President Trump convened the National Security Council as White House aide debated retaliatory options. The BRICS bloc formally eclipsed the G7 in economic output as revised IMF data confirmed the alliance now commands 35% of global GDP versus the G7 30%. U.S. Secretary of Commerce Howard Lutnick verified the shift during an emergency briefing, citing BRICS consolidations of energy markets, control over 80% of rare earth mineral production, and the accelerated adoption of its new development bank loans across Africa and Southeast Asia, Lutnick noted that BRICS nations processed over 60% of global trade in non-dollar currencies last quarter, a 400% increase since 2023, directly eroding the dollar's reserve status. Supply chain monitors confirmed 47 multinational corporations relocated headquarters to BRICS jurisdiction this week alone, including 2 Fortune 500 tech firms fleeing U.S. secondary sanctions. European Council President Charles Michel conceded the G7 faces structural decline without immediate reforms. Russian state media broadcast live celebrations in Moscow's Red Square, just tax posts with footage of shuttered factories in Germany's Ruhr Valley. Israeli forces intercepted a barrage of Iranian drones and missiles over the Golan Heights, marking Tehran's first direct attack in 6 months. The assault, launched from Syrian territory, targeted Israeli intelligence facilities, but caused no casualties due to Iron Dome and Arrow 3 defenses. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu convened his war cabinet, authorizing retaliatory airstrikes on Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps (IRGC) based near Aleppo, Syria. Satellite imagery confirmed the destruction of 3 missile depots and a drone command center. Iranian state media acknowledged material losses but boasted of new hypersonic capabilities breaching Zionist defenses. U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio condemned Iran's aggression in a call with Israeli Foreign Minister Israel Katz, reaffirming America's ironclad commitment to Israel's security. Pentagon Chief Peter Hegseth deployed USS Gerald R. Ford Carrier Strike Group to the Eastern Mediterranean as a deterrent. Meanwhile, Director of National Intelligence Tulsi Gabbard warned the Senate that Iran could activate Hezbollah sleeper cells in Europe if strikes escalate. Humanitarian agencies reported displaced civilians fleeing northern Israel and southern Syria as cross-border artillery exchange intensified. NATO convened an emergency summit in Brussels as Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg warned of the most severe security crisis since the Cold War. The trigger, Russia's intensified missile campaign against Ukraine and BRICS, formalized military coordinations. U.S. Secretary of Defense Peter Hegseth announced the immediate deployment of 300 additional F-35 fighters and THAAD missile batteries to frontline states Poland, Romania, and the Baltics, bypassing standard congressional review under Article 5 contingency protocols. German Chancellor Olaf Scholz reluctantly committed 12,000 Bundeswehr troops to a new Eastern Shield Rapid Reaction Force after heated debates about diverting resources from domestic energy crisis. French President Emmanuel Macron withheld full support, demanding strategic autonomy talks. Simultaneously, NATO intelligence chief confirmed Russia had moved tactical nuclear weapons to Belarusian storage site 40 miles from the Polish border. Director of National Intelligence Tulsi Gabbard briefed allies on intercepted GRU communications indicating Russian plans to simulate a limited nuclear strike in the Baltic Sea during upcoming war games. President Trump, via secure video, demanded NATO members immediately boost defense spending to 3% of GDP or face consequences, singling out Canada and Spain for free riding. The summit ended without a joint communique amid Turkish objection to Kurdish militia support. Many of my listeners, like 70%, haven't subscribed to my YouTube channel. And so many of you don't even know that you haven't subscribed. And that is actually what makes the show going. It's almost like you're making a donation to the show. So that's why I ask again and again, because it enables us to grow and grow and grow. And we're going for the long haul here. And listen, if this is your first time listening to So Rich, you don't have to subscribe. You guys, your first one's on me. But if you have watched this show before, it's like you are a freeloader now. So all I would ask you is, if you have seen this show before and you like it, help me, help my team here. Hit the subscribe button and we will continue to build this show for you. That I swear. Thank you to all of you guys who have subscribed. It means a lot to me. Now hit that subscribe and like button now. Thank you. That's all for me for today. I will see you soon. Bye for now.